Hello, and welcome back to Talent Thrives Here, where we talk to people managing people. Our special guest today is Allie Meyers. Allie is a well-being advocate, educator, speaker, and mindset shifter. Allie, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Lance, for having me. I appreciate it.
I was looking at your website this morning, and it's amazing sort of the practice that you bring to people that are in a stressful situation. And I think that, could be pretty much anyone, whether you're running a family, running a business, those sort of things. And I was curious, what brought you to this practice in your life? What brought you to your business?
Oh, I am a huge proponent of recognizing the fact that every job we've had in the past or experience we've had is laying the groundwork for what's to come. And, that's, I'm sure, appropriate for many people who listen to this podcast who may be seeking a job, knowing that you are continuously, developing skills that will be useful for future roles. So I really had a lot of different types of experiences that led me here. My training is in engineering. I went to an engineering school where I was a chemical engineer and love everything about science and problem solving and evidence and research. But I knew I didn't want to work in a manufacturing facility my whole life. I wanted to use some other skills. So when I left corporate America, this is now maybe 25 years ago, I started a few entrepreneurial ventures, one around, speaking to women, one specifically around being a local blogger who highlighted small businesses kind of pre and in the pandemic years. All, again, really growing some skills around digital marketing and blogging, but knowing and recognizing that for years, I've really had a strong interest in the whole science of human flourishing. So psychology, positive psychology, neuroscience, what makes people tick, not necessarily studying it from the negative aspect, like diagnosed mental health conditions, PTSD, but looking at it from the other side, these people who are incredibly successful and happy, what is it that they're doing each and every day? What are their practices? What is their mindset? And are there things that we can be implementing to help us thrive as well? So really diving into that research, and this definitely came to a head at the start of the pandemic when I recognized that most people, especially working professionals, found themselves at home saying, okay, really, how did I get here? I finally have a few minutes to think about life and what maybe led me here. And is this really where I want to be? And is it where I want to be for the rest of my life? So at that point, and recognizing the fact that we really have a pretty serious mental health issue in the country and the world at this point. Again, going back, getting certifications in positive psychology and executive coaching, taking obtaining a science of well-being certification at Yale, and diving into the research and the strategies of what can help other people who may be either going through a stressful time or simple ways that we can be managing our lifestyle and maybe changing and tweaking a few things that we do to prepare ourselves for the modern world, which is incredibly hard to navigate.
Excellent. Amazing.
A
Thank you.
long answer to your short question.
No, it's fantastic though. I like it a lot. And, in our work, we quite often are consulting in a company going through change. Either it's downsizing or it's upsizing. Mm-hmm. And I'm often fascinated by the leadership whereby, you are looking for that CEO with a vision and a positive spin or positive outlook. And, the tone that is communicated to the troops, so to speak, can make or break a company, right? The morale is there. And we often see that, that executive team is sheltering the team from the real picture. Because the real picture is, maybe we've got money for 90 days and after that, we're not really sure what's going to happen. And so they're in this dance of performance art for their staff saying, it's fine. We've got this. Don't worry about it. Yeah. If you've heard a rumor about that, just throw, water on it. And so it's amazing to me, the executive mindset where done well, done right, they can keep the team focused on what they need to deliver on a daily basis while they go and manage the bigger fire, behind closed doors, so
Yes.
to speak.
Yes,
Um,
it's very difficult to be a manager in 2025. At the same time, I think it is the single most critical position within a company because you really do have the ability to change people's lives, and employees are not in a good place right now. There's a 2024 Gallup State of the Workplace Wellbeing Report, which showed that we're at an 11-year low with employee engagement and at an all-time low since they started doing their research in 2009 for life satisfaction. And so we're dealing with a workforce who is entering, their jobs not in a particularly good place. And that really is a result of, all of the micro stressors going on in the world around us. No matter what role you're in, whether you're actively working or seeking a job or you stay at home, you are being affected by the information coming at us from every angle. The negative news cycles, we have a negativity bias, and the
yeah,
media is smart. They're going to take advantage of that, and that's really to our detriment. So we have to be mindful of that. We have to manage what we're allowing in,
right.
especially with the politics and the global unrest and everything else going on. And we also, one of the things that I do, so I do a lot of keynotes and workshops for organizations, is we talk about the 5 building blocks. And I just want to touch on them, managing your mindset. So that's 2 of them together, managing the negative and cultivating the positive. So recognizing that we have this negative mindset, and we really need to be focusing on what's going well within our roles and celebrating when people on our team are making contributions. Another thing, worth recognizing as leaders in 2025 is, especially our younger generation of employees, they're looking for meaning and purpose. These are a couple buzzwords. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be working for an impact-driven or, like, let's say a not-for-profit, but it's really helpful for the manager to be that liaison in helping the employee recognize how they are contributing to the overall goals of the organization and what role they're playing, because that can really help somebody to feel satisfied in their job role and feeling like they're making a difference or not. So that's
Mhm.
another way that a manager can help. But another one of my building blocks is mindfulness, creating space within your day so that we're not, so let's say you're seeking a job or you're actively working, making sure that we are walking away from our devices and just taking small bits of space within our day to reset away from the electronics without allowing, this stimulation in. That's really important, especially important as we kind of maybe second guess what direction we want to go in. Just because we had a career in something, um, you know, something in particular doesn't mean that, that's what we were meant to be. So making sure we create the space to reflect and to think about it, what is it that, how do I envision success for me? And
Mhm.
chances are, once we think about it from a quiet space, there are many different ways to get to that ultimate goal. And I think we get so hung up in the path and, feeling that we have to control every step along the way, when really having a fulfilling job may, when we think about it from a quiet moment, it could be something incredibly different from something we've been doing in the past. So those are just
It,
some bits and pieces.
yeah, it touched on. I'm just reading a book right now about an executive who was displaced, sort of at a hostile kind of resignation
Mm.
from a very large, very successful company. Basically, the board level disagreed with the vision and so on, so they canceled him basically. And
Mm-hmm.
he goes through that same reset at home of, well, I've always been employed and I've always made good money. I've always been the provider, and he thinks the phone is going to start ringing because the competitors will be, oh, well, he's available, we should go hire him. And he
Mm.
said after a couple months, that's not happening.
Right.
And so it was one of those things where his identity had been wrapped up in this business for a long time, and
Mm.
he felt he was at the top of his game. And all of a sudden he realized, I'm out.
Mm.
and where do I go from here? And it's an interesting read, and he goes through a number of sort of iterations of thought of, could I do this, that, the other thing?
Mhm.
And ultimately he decides that it's not going to defeat him, and he's going to go big rather than shrink. And
Mhm.
anyways, it was an interesting story, but he goes through the sort of machinations of the stress, and his family has depended on him, and he's got kids in school, and a wife to support because she's not working. And
Right.
so, and I think this is the struggle for a lot of people, is they, to your point about the negativity bias, it's you got to be very careful
Mhm.
that you don't wake up in the morning and start your day with negative thoughts, and then cycle downward. And you
Yeah.
do have to be able to either have a coach or mentor, someone to bounce
Mm.
these thoughts off of.
Mhm.
And I always use these analogies of like sports and even writing. Every writer needs an editor, and
Yeah.
every hockey player needs a coach. And I
Yes.
played competitive sports. We used to record back in the day on videotape. Uh, but then to rewatch, that's why that play didn't go properly.
Yeah.
And it's really
Yeah.
hard for a person to have that lens sort of looking above them, down onto what does your environment look like? Because you can't always see it when you're in the middle of it, right? And
You
so,
can't you can't always see it. You're absolutely right. And I always encourage people too in that situation. We get so fixated because of the negativity bias on focusing on what rejections we got and what's not coming in. But another one of my building blocks is goal setting and getting, and just making sure that you are very intentionally in this crazy world that's going to take all of our attention if we let it. Creating very actionable things that you can do to move in the direction that you wish to go. And it might not be exact, but researching, maybe new career paths or something different that you don't know a whole lot about, and making sure each and every day that we are creating those goals. And we get this little burst of dopamine every time we can intentionally put something down and act on it. We're keeping those promises to ourselves. We're building confidence. We're getting the good kind of dopamine. And that really creates satisfaction and momentum moving in a positive direction. So, that could be talking to many different people in different industries, just in a very inquisitive way and through a lens of curiosity. So tell me, like, what is your typical workday? And all of these things, if you're not really going at it from in a very desperate manner, and we're looking at it more as doing research and collecting information, that can, it will always lead to something positive and push you in a positive direction.
great. Excellent. Thank you. Um, is there any big misconceptions about stress management that you've come across in your work?
Well, I can tell you, burnout is a big buzzword right now, Lance, and people traditionally, people have used the word burnout specifically for an unmanageable workload. I am a firm believer that here, in the way we are trying to integrate work and life, or simply live, is so prone to burnout from a much larger lens. Meaning, burnout can be caused, not only by an unreasonable workload, but I'll tell you, the official definition, according to the World Health Organization, is the inability to manage workplace stressors. Now, I see that in a few different ways. There's the ability to manage and the actual workplace stressors. As you can imagine, our ability to manage could really vary day to day, depending on what's going on in our personal lives. We may be caring for a sick loved one, and a workload that could feel perfectly fine last week is now just too much for us to handle. So again, I think a superpower of modern management is being able to have very direct conversations with your people, and not being scared to do so, not feeling like you're going to have to, be their therapist, but asking very open-ended questions like, how are you managing your workload, and what can we do to help support you? Because a lot of the times you can just talk very directly through a bottleneck, and that person feels a lot of relief and feels significantly less burned out than before that conversation. So I'd say the myth is that burnout is caused by workload, when it could be caused by feeling that the workplace is not particularly fair, or your personal inability to manage boundaries. We have a hybrid and very popular, hybrid and remote working situations, and people are choosing that for work-life balance.
Right.
But that is not always the solution to work-life balance, because we go to work from home and we have a much more difficult time managing boundaries from home.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. While you were talking, one of my dogs was struggling at my feet. And I'm like, no, not right now.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about remote work, and here we are. So,
Yes.
to your point, it's fascinating because I was talking to a friend who has a stand-up desk, and he said during the workday, he has it at high setting and he stands.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 5 or 6 o'clock, he lowers it. And he said anything that in the low stance is personal, and anything in the high stance is business.
Well, what a great way to physically incorporate that boundary as a reminder, because how easy is it with devices now to, finally you're going to shut down work and you're going to go answer this personal something, and then whoop, you're pulled right back in. So boundaries are a huge, huge issue in today's working world.
Absolutely. And I think, the thing that I've looked at from an HR perspective and a recruiting perspective is retention and attraction of employees. And if you're an employer, there's a number of studies that have shown that offering at least hybrid sets you out in the crowd as more attractive to a job seeker, because they have some flexibility.
Yes.
I would know one company that asks for everyone to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office. Monday and Friday are optional unless there's an emergency meeting. But for people with kids in daycare and all those other things, and even doctor's appointments, all that stuff, they can schedule them. I think a lot of them feel, on the Monday or the Friday, in a way that they couldn't when they had to be in 5 days a week.
Yes. I am forgetting right here. I actually wrote it down. I just read an article that was really interesting. So they have terminology for this. There's the blender and the splitter. There are people who wish to blend their work and their lives throughout the day and work for a few hours and then go take care of something and then work. And some people have to do it out of necessity, I understand, depending on their at-home situation. Other people want this splitter, want to be splitters. They want to take care of, out of work business before, out of work business after. I am a mother of 4 young kids. I will tell you, I would personally choose splitter all day long, because I find it very difficult to be transitioning from life to work and keep those clear boundaries. I do the best I can in my situation because it's out of necessity right now. But once my kids are older, I would definitely prefer splitter. And women are about 50. This particular Gallup article was about women in particular, and they're about 50-50 with what they would choose to do. But just because you're gaining the control of your lives by being able to work from home, you have to be extra diligent about creating those boundaries and, managing that work life.
Great. Yeah. It's still, it amazes me that some people can juggle it really well. I had a client on a call a couple of years back, and it was during the pandemic, and he was in his bedroom talking into the camera, and his 3-year-old came rushing in the middle of the call, and she gave him a big kiss on the cheek and said, "I love you, Daddy." And he's like, "Not right now."
Yeah.
And then he apologized. I said, "No, that was like the best thing I needed right now, was to see a small child all excited." And she knew she wasn't supposed to be there, so she knew she was being bad. But it was just one of the cutest things during the pandemic that I remember, was this little girl going, "Oh my God."
Yes.
And then she ran out. She knew, I wasn't supposed to do this, but
yes. And think about how much that scene has changed since before the pandemic. I mean, we had the occasional Zoom call or whatever, but that would be unheard of. Where now, I see it all. I see it all today. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah. Good. Well, the other thing I want to touch on was just, an identity whereby somebody, Here's the thing that resonates with me. Years ago, I was going through some physical therapy for some sports injuries, and the osteopath had been a world professional rugby player. And from an early age, he'd always played very sort of high impact sports.
Mhm.
And it got to the point where he was one of these guys who was recruited by international teams because he was quite a star. And he said he'd suffered about 5 concussions during
Wow.
his early 20s. And the doctor said, one more and you could be a vegetable. Like, this is like,
Mhm.
you have to stop playing. It doesn't matter how much money's on the line here. You're going to, dramatically impact your life here. One more hit to the noggin. And he said to me, he said, this is while, I'm getting my leg stretched or my arm popped into
Yeah.
place or whatever. And he said it took him years to unravel that I'm not a rugby player.
Right. Right.
And he said, because that was actually a huge part of everything I did was I'm a rugby player. I work out every
Yes.
day and I do this and I do that. And
Yes.
so he said it took him many years to say, I'm just going to channel I want to be the best at
Mhm.
into another field. And he said, I want to be the
Yeah.
best osteopath ever. And so he
Yeah.
said, but it took him quite a while to get, and, at the time I was struggling with a bunch of injuries. And I said, like, but I play sports 3 or 4 or 5 days a week and I do all this stuff. And he said, well, think of trying to, all that time that's spent doing that. If you can't do it, what are you going to do with all that time?
Right.
What else are you going to apply yourself with this much passion and
Right.
enthusiasm? And I find, in our practice, sometimes we find displaced executives.
Mhm.
Their career shifted or their industry shifted, and they were in the hot seat for a while, and now they're not.
Right.
And again, it's this, I often think it's almost like, phases of grief and mourning,
Sure.
because there's this
Absolutely.
disbelief for quite a while at the beginning. Like, no, it's going to turn around. This is going to happen any second now. And I can't believe,
Right.
and then eventually, and there's an anger phase and all, again, like a grief cycle. So I'm curious, if you had to coach somebody like that that's pivoting in their career to
Mhm.
potentially find something new or different, what things would you do to kind of maybe open the door to a different mindset on pivots
Mm.
in their career?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have lived for decades being defined by our roles and our careers. And I'm pretty convinced that this next generation of employees are challenging us in many, many ways. And
Right.
they refuse to be defined by their careers, and I think we're gonna have less of a challenge with that as these as Gen Z, let's say, moves up through the workforce. But with the people who are there, I think that we have one of the most amazing times in history where we have so much available to us. So now you're finding yourself in a situation where you have more time than you've ever had before. And you have the ability to learn just about anything that may be of interest to you, whether you want to use it as, a new career, or whether it's just something that you want to learn on your own, from, obtaining certifications and things that can help you build a new career, to connecting with somebody on the other side of the world to learn about something that you might be interested in, or to go back to school, remotely, and to gain a new degree of some sort.
Right.
I just think we really have to look at it at, really focus on the opportunities that are available. But of course, the opportunities are there. But if we never take the time to sit in our own silence and really think about what is it that success would look like to me, what would that day look like? What types of things would I be doing? What types of habits would I have? And when we take the time to focus on envisioning what that could look like, we can start gaining some clarity around what types of careers or what types of interests, we could now begin to grow or explore. I really think we need to remind ourselves that we have opportunities that are amazing and at our fingertips that we didn't have 20 years ago if you were out of a job. And the world is your oyster. Don't limit yourself by how you defined your life through your career in the past. Look at it as, an open book. Freedom. There are so many freedom-based businesses that are taught online now. You can really do. The world is your oyster. So I know
Right.
I'm always like too positive, probably like everybody's biggest cheerleader, but I truly feel that we have the opportunity to do anything and reinvent ourselves in any way, much more than we did in the past.
Right. Excellent. Alison, thank you for this. I think I'm going to end on that note because that was great. Um,
Right.
and we could probably talk for half an hour more or an hour or
Oh,
something like that. But if anyone wants to find you, I know they can AlisonMeyers.com, and it's Meyers Meyers.com. You have some
yes.
great tools on your website, and
Yes. And Lance, no matter where somebody is, either, within their career or post-career, we are all dealing with stress today. So I'm more than happy to pass on my stress slayer guide, which are 5 very simple activities and exercises that you can implement in your own lives if you need it, that take only 5 minutes or less. So I will share that with you, and maybe you can share that in your show notes.
I will do that. Thank you so much again for your time and your wisdom today. I really appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care.